My hand hovered over the brass doorknob. The cold metal was smooth, polished by decades of palms pushing through. I knew I should knock. Announce myself like a proper daughter returning home at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. But I heard the laughter inside the drawing room. She still lives in that sad apartment. My dad laughed, the sound rich and cutting, while my sister showed off her new Tesla. The image flashed across my mind, though I knew the Tesla reference was only a placeholder for their actual current obsession. My focus narrowed. I heard a glass clink and ice rattle. Richard's voice, my father's, cut through the noise, confident and arrogant, the voice he used when he was about to close a deal or ruin someone's life. Another round. Gentlemen. Sloan's laugh followed, sharp and bright. My sister saved that sound for moments of calculated destruction. I had heard it directed at opposing counsel, at waiters who displeased her, and at me when I was 19 and still stupid enough to think my computer science degree meant anything in this house. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, a reflex of recognition, not surprise. I should have walked away then. I should have driven back to my anonymous apartment, where, the second-hand furniture was mine and the working locks kept out everyone, including the people who shared my last name. But then 3 words rooted my feet to the Persian runner beneath them. Rosewood Cottage Sale. That was my grandmother's house. The only place in my entire childhood where someone had looked at me and seen something other than a disappointment in a cardigan. I leaned closer. The heavy, old door was an imperfect seal. Sound traveled easily through the gaps. 20 million. My father's voice carried the terrible weight of confession. Bad cases. Thought I could win them. Gambled wrong. Bryce Sterling, my ex-boyfriend, spoke next. His voice had that slick quality investment bankers cultivate. Utterly without friction, he was the man who had called me brilliant, right before dismissing me as not wife material. The cottage appraises at $850,000. Quick sale. Clean paperwork. I knew the arithmetic already. $850,000 was nothing to them, yet everything to me. My attention sharpened as Bryce continued. My commission is 8%. $160,000 for me. Enough to cover your immediate obligations. And Rosa Jane never has to know the extent of the problem. Sloan's laugh, a dry, cruel sound, followed. She won't ask questions. She never does. Just signs whatever you put in front of her and smiles like a grateful puppy. My own mind, already racing through a separate calculation, dismissed the debt. $20 million was less than nothing to me. Aether Systems cleared $40 million in revenue last quarter alone, and the initial public offering opened tomorrow morning at a projected $84 per share. I could open that door, walk in, and offer to write a check. I could fix this problem immediately. But the contempt in their voices held me still. Problem immediately. But the contempt in their voices held me still. But I didn't move. Because my father was still talking. Don't worry about her. She's too stupid to read the fine print. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her, just to get a pat on the head. The words landed like a fist to the sternum. Not a slap, but a punch that knocked the air from my lungs and left me gasping. Stupid. She's been playing with computers for years. Sloan's voice dripped with contempt. Still no real job. Still living in that sad little apartment. I felt the shift then. Something cold and clean and sharp replaced the familiar ache of rejection. They did not misunderstand me. They despised my intelligence because it threatened their control. I turned away from the door. My footsteps made no sound on the runner as I walked back down the hallway, past the expensive, untouched bookshelves of the library, and out the front entrance. Callan, my head of security for 3 years, stood beside my waiting car. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. He opened the back door without a word. Get me the audit logs for Scott and Partners, I said, sliding into the leather seat. My voice was lower, colder than I had ever heard it. Tonight. Callan's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. For 3 years, I had been the polite boss who apologized for asking him to work late. He saw something different now. Yes, boss. The engine started. We pulled away from the estate, from the people inside who thought I was too stupid to read fine print. Too weak to understand what they were doing to me. They were wrong. And in the next 24 hours, they were going to realize exactly how wrong they had been. The strategic war had begun. The town car was a solid, silent vault pulling away from the estate. The cold realization from the hallway had fully crystallized into a plan. I had given Callan the order for the audit logs, and he had delivered. Now, hours later, I was in the Four Seasons seat. I was not there for the $8,000 a night price tag or the luxury. I was there because the walls were soundproof. And the internet connection ran on dedicated fiber. Nobody from my family would ever think to look for me in a hotel that required a black card just to book a room. It was 2:30 in the morning. 3 monitors glowed blue across the mahogany desk, each one displaying a different layer of Scott and Partners' financial infrastructure. My fingers moved across the keyboard without conscious thought. 10,000 hours of coding translated into commands that peeled back every transaction, every wire transfer, every panicked message to their accountant. Aether Systems provided the cybersecurity to Richard's firm and had for 2 years. He did not know that. He did not know that every email, every financial record, every panicked communication flowed through servers I controlled. He had called me stupid. I pulled up the first document. A case file from 18 months ago. Richard Scott, representing a pharmaceutical company against a class action lawsuit. The opposing counsel had documentation, witnesses, momentum. My father bet $6 million on a settlement that never came. He lost everything. Next file. Another gamble, another loss. The pattern emerged like a fracture spreading across glass. $20 million. Gone. Not stolen, not embezzled. Just arrogant, reckless decisions. Made by a man who believed his charm and reputation could override facts. I opened Sloan's financial records next. Her surgeon salary was substantial. $280,000 a year. It should have been enough for anyone. Except she spent $580,000 annually. Designer clothes. Luxury vacations. A wine collection that cost more per bottle than I paid for my first car. She had been bleeding money for years. Using credit cards like they were somehow disconnected from reality and consequence. I found the email thread buried in her personal account. The subject line made my stomach clench, but I opened it anyway. The Rosa problem. It was an exchange between Sloan and Richard 3 months ago. We need to activate the family ATM before she figures out she has options. Sloan had written. Richard's response. She won't figure it out. She's too busy playing with computers. Sloan again. The cottage is the play. Sentimental value. She'll do anything to keep it. We frame it as helping her. Take what we need. Move on. 3 months. They had been planning this for 3 months. I screenshotted everything. Every email. Every transaction. Every lie they told themselves about who I am and what I am worth. I had spent my life fixing their problems, and they saw that sacrifice as weakness to be exploited. My phone buzzed at 3:15. Preston Vance. The only person outside my security team who knew the truth about MJ Scott. You should be sleeping, I said, my voice rough from disuse. So should you. Preston's voice carried that particular strain of someone who had spent the last 48 hours preparing for the biggest financial event of his career. The Aether IPO is tracking to break records. Less than 24 hours until the bell. I know. He paused. I heard him moving, probably pacing his office. Preston didn't sit still when money was on the line. Because if you don't legally sever your finances before market open, their debt becomes your liability. California family law is not your friend here. The words hit like cold water. I knew this somewhere in my brain, but hearing it stated plainly, hearing the timeline compressed into hours, instead of abstract future consequences, made it terrifyingly real. How bad? I ask. $20 million in debt against $2.8 billion in assets. The creditors will come for you the second your net worth goes public. They'll argue familial responsibility, shared household history. You'll spend years in litigation, even if you win. I closed my eyes. The monitors painted blue shadows across my eyelids. Save them or save your empire. Rosa, Preston said. You don't get both. I had been saving them my whole life. Anonymous payments, quiet fixes, problems that disappeared before they knew problems existed. And they still saw me as stupid. I need a quitclaim deed, I said. For Rosewood Cottage. That's not enough. You need a full financial separation waiver. Every future claim, every potential liability. Can you bury it in the language? I pressed. Page 7, paragraph 3. Make it look like standard charity paperwork. Preston went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. That's scorched earth. That's survival. They'll sign it without reading, I stated, certainty freezing my tone. You know they will. I'm counting on it. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him weighing the ethics against the necessity. The friends and family, IPO allocations. He sounded grim. If you include the waiver, they forfeit everything. How much? 1.5 million shares at projected opening. If we hit $84 per share, that's $126 million. If the stock performs the way I think it will. He trailed off. I did the math instantly. If the stock quadrupled like similar IPOs have, if Aether Systems proved what I knew it could prove, the forfeiture becomes $500 million. They wanted to steal my grandmother's house for $850,000. I was about to let away $500 million. The magnitude was staggering, but my resolve was absolute. Draft it, I commanded. Have it ready by noon. Rosa. Preston's voice softened. And he almost never used my first name. Are you sure? I looked at the monitors, at the evidence of their contempt displayed in financial transactions and casual cruelty. I looked at the email where Sloan called me an ATM. They had not activated yet. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We ended the call. The suite fell silent except for the quiet hum of electronics and my own breathing. I had built an empire to protect myself. And now I had to use it to destroy the people who gave me my name. My emotional arc had shifted from avoidance to embrace. I was no longer the rescuer. I was the architect of my own survival. The sun was starting to rise, painting the city outside my soundproof suit in a cold, gray light. The plan was drafted. The trap was set, but I had a few hours left before the meeting at 3 o'clock. The waiting was the hardest part. The silence felt heavy after the intense focus of the audit. My phone buzzed at 8:04 a.m. I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, 3 blocks from my anonymous apartment, engine idling, watching steam rise from a paper cup I had not touched. The screen lit up with Sloan's latest Instagram post. It was a photo of me at 19, unwashed hair pulled into a messy ponytail, oversized hoodie swallowing my frame, hunched over a laptop in the corner of the campus library. Dark circles under my eyes like bruises. I remembered that night. I was 72 hours into a coding marathon, living on vending machine coffee, and the kind of obsessive focus that makes you forget meals exist. The caption ready, Throwback Thursday, to little sis's lost years tinkering with code. Some of us grew up. Family love, priorities. The comments were a chorus of small, sharp knives. When will she get a real job? Such a disappointment to the family. Maybe it's time for an intervention. 200 comments. All of them seeing exactly what Sloan wanted them to see: the failure, the embarrassment, the family burden who never grew up. They were softening me up, making sure I was wounded and desperate when I walked into that library. The cruelty was precise, surgical. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat. My coffee had gone cold. They wanted me grateful for whatever scraps they offered, even if those scraps were my own grandmother's house. I drove to Rosewood Cottage alone. The gate was unlocked, as it always had been. My grandmother never believed in keeping people out, which was probably why she left the house to me instead of to Richard. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires. I parked beneath the ancient oak tree my grandmother planted when she was 23 and newly married. The house looked tired. The white paint was peeling, the shutters needed replacing, and the front steps sagged slightly in the middle. But the bones were good, solid. The kind of construction they did not do anymore, when people built things to last instead of building them to sell. I let myself in with the key I had carried for 8 years. My grandmother pressed it into my palm the summer before she died, closing my fingers around the brass teeth. "This is yours, Rosa," she had said. "Not your father's. Not Sloan's. Yours. Don't forget that." I had thought she meant the key. Now I knew she meant the belonging. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old wood, and the ghost of her lavender perfume. I ran my hand along the banister, feeling the honest wear from honest use. Her needlepoint still hung in the hallway, a quote from Virginia Woolf. "A woman must have money and a room of her own." She stitched that when she was 67. Declaration of Independence. I walked slowly through the rooms. The kitchen with its chipped yellow tile. The living room with the reading chair by the window, cracked leather that molded to her body over 40 years. I sat in that chair now. The photo albums were still on the side table. I knew what was inside. Hundreds of pictures of my grandmother and me, spanning 18 years. Her teaching me to garden, to cook, to code on that ancient desktop computer she bought at a yard sale because she believed technology was power and girls needed power. Not a single photo included my father or Sloan, unless it was a formal family portrait where everyone was smiling and lying. She knew. Even then, she knew. I had always been the giver, the one who fixed the computer, who sat with her during her final month. Sloan came twice. Richard did not come at all. Yet, when she died, they cried at the funeral. Loud, performative grief. And then they tried to sell her house 3 months later. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, clear as if she were sitting across from me. "The house is wood and stone. Your dignity is what matters." I heard gravel crunch outside. Callan filled the doorway, a black folder in his hands. He was wearing his standard uniform. Dark suit, no tie, his expression giving away nothing. "The final documents, boss." He set the folder on the side table. "Everything's ready." I did not open it. I knew what was inside. The quitclaim deed and the waiver. The trap that looked like surrender. Callan just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, looking at the needlepoint on the wall. "They don't deserve you." His voice was rough, unused to emotion. "Your grandmother would be proud of what you've built." Something in my chest loosened, just enough to breathe. "Thank you." He nodded once and left. The door clicked shut. My phone buzzed. Preston's name lit up the screen. "IPO opens at $84 per share. You're about to become a billionaire. Ready?" I typed back with steady fingers. More ready than they'll ever know. 2 o'clock arrived faster than it should. I stood in my apartment bathroom, staring at the black suit hanging on the back of the door. Tom Ford, tailored to fit like armor. Today, I was wearing it to a family party. I dressed slowly, each piece deliberate. The suit, the white silk blouse beneath it, the Patek Philippe watch that cost more than my father's car. My reflection stared back, a stranger and yet completely familiar. The woman my grandmother always knew I would become. 2:40, 7 p.m. 1 hour before market close, I got into the town car. Callan drove without asking where we were going. He knew. I texted Preston. The bait is ready. Let them take it. His response was immediate. They won't know what hit them. I was not going to a party. I was going to a negotiation. And they wanted to see me sign my life away. They would get their wish. Just not the way they expected. The library smelled like leather and old money, a scent that once represented knowledge, but now just signaled expensive wallpaper. I walked in wearing my suit, my armor, 30 minutes after leaving my apartment, and the scene was exactly as predicted. Richard sat behind the mahogany desk like a king granting an audience. His personal attorney, a gray suit with a forgettable face, stood beside him. Bryce Sterling leaned against the bookshelf to my left, arms crossed, that smug little smile playing at his mouth. The smile that said he was already counting his 8% commission. It was 3 o'clock. 1 hour until market close. Sloan's floral perfume arrived 5 seconds before she did. She swept past me without acknowledgement, taking her position at Richard's right hand. The favored daughter who became a surgeon and married well. Thank you for coming, Rosa. Richard's voice carried that particular tone. He perfected warm, but isn't. The one he used on clients right before explaining why their case was hopeless. I know this is short notice. You said it was important. I said, keeping my voice soft and uncertain. The way I used to sound at 19 when I desperately wanted him to notice me, to value anything I did. It is. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. I sat, folding my hands in my lap, letting my shoulders curve inward slightly. I adopted the body language of someone who had never learned to take up space. The attorney slid a document across the desk. It was heavy bond paper, at least 20 pages. The title was printed in boldy. Trust Fund Release and Property Transfer. My heart didn't race, and my hands didn't sweat. But I made sure they thought they did. I knew exactly where the landmine was buried, and they were about to step on it. We've been discussing your future. Richard began, sounding paternal, almost concerned. You're 28 years old, still trying to find your path. That's admirable, sweetheart. But it's time we helped you get started. Started with what? I let my voice crack just a little, just enough to sell the desperation. Life. Sloan's tone could cut glass. We're releasing $50,000 from the family trust. Seed money for your little computer hobby. A little computer hobby. The words sat in my chest like stones. Aether Systems employed 217 people. Our quarterly revenue exceeded what their law firm made in 2 years. But I said none of it. Instead, I picked up the document with trembling fingers. Real trembling this time, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of not laughing in their faces. I scanned the first page as standard trust release language. Page 2 outlined the $50,000 payment, making it sound generous, necessary, and overdue. By page 3, we were into property transfer clauses. By page 7, paragraph 3, they were taking everything. Rosewood Cottage, my grandmother's house. The only place I ever felt safe. They were transferring the deed to cover outstanding family obligations. Richard's $20 million in gambling debts, disguised as legal fees. This is very generous. The attorney spoke for the first time, his voice a practiced neutrality. Given your situation, Miss Scott, I'd say your family is being extraordinarily accommodating. My situation. Like I was the problem. I don't understand. I looked up at Richard, letting my eyes get wet, just on the edge of crying. Why the cottage? That's Grandma's house. Was her house. Sloan was already bored with this conversation. Her phone sat on the desk in front of her, Instagram open. She's been dead for 3 years, Rosa. You can't even afford the property taxes. But I could figure something out. I pleaded, my voice going higher, desperate. Please, Dad. It's all I have. You'll have $50,000. Richard checked his Rolex. 3:17. He was impatient. That's more than most people your age have managed to save. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like poison. Can't we find another way? I was performing full out now. I could get a job. A real job. I could pay off the debts myself. Bryce laughed. A short, sharp bark. Doing what, Rosa? You've been coding in your apartment for 6 years. No publications. No professional network. The market's brutal right now. You'd be lucky to land an entry-level position. It's better this way, Sloan said, not looking up. You can't afford the upkeep anyway. And honestly, living in the past isn't healthy. You need to move forward. The attorney tapped the signature line on page 19. Miss Scott, I have another appointment at 4. If we could finalize this now. Richard leaned forward, his expression shifting from paternal to cold. Sign it or get nothing. We're done coddling you, Rosa. It's time you learned how the real world works. The clock on the wall read 3:42. 18 minutes until market close. Sign the document. Richard bit off each word. I reached for the pen, allowing my hand to tremble visibly. But before the tip touched the paper, I stopped. I want a copy, I whispered. For my records. Grandma always said to keep records. Richard rolled his eyes, but the attorney murmured. It's standard procedure, Mr. Scott. Actually, it's better for enforcement if we have duplicate originals. He slid the second, identical set across the mahogany. I signed the first copy, then the second. My handwriting looked broken and uncertain on both. Richard signed. The attorney notarized both stacks with heavy thunks of his stamp. Happy. Richard snatched his copy before the ink dried, not reading past page 2. He never even glanced at page 7. I pulled my copy toward me, folding it slowly, clutching it to my chest like a security blanket. Thank you, Daddy. Excellent. Richard stood. I'm glad we could resolve this efficiently. The funds will be transferred to your account by end of week. They left. All of them. Sloan already typing on her phone. Bryce shooting me one last pitying look. The attorney packed his briefcase without a word. The door closed. Silence. I counted to 30, making absolutely sure they were gone. The tears vanished, gone like turning off a faucet. I checked my Paytech Philip. 3:47. 13 minutes to close. Checkmate. I whispered to the empty room. I stood and smoothed my jacket, checking that the duplicate original was secure in the inner pocket. The document included complete waiver of all future familial financial claims, including but not limited to friends and family stock allocations, inheritance expectations, and corporate benefits. They had just signed away $500 million for $50,000 and a cottage worth $850,000. I walked to the French doors that opened onto the terrace. Outside, the garden party was already starting. I could hear the string quartet tuning up. I was not leaving. Not yet. 11 minutes until they realized what they had done. 11 minutes until everything changed. The champagne tasted like victory to Richard. I knew that because I watched him raise his glass at the podium, surveying the 200 guests scattered across the manicured lawn of the Scott estate. The string quartet was playing, the uniformed servers were moving efficiently, and the flower arrangements cost more than most people's monthly rent. I stood near the back, my black suit sharp as a blade, watching him perform. To family legacy, Richard announced, his voice carrying across the garden with practiced authority. To the businesses that define excellence in our community. Take Aether Systems, for example. Remarkable cybersecurity firm. Their IPO today represents everything American enterprise should aspire to: innovation, discipline, vision. Sloan stood beside him, her phone held high, live streaming the event. She was angling for the perfect shot, her smile luminous and full of misplaced confidence. She genuinely believed she had won. Unlike some hobbies. Richard continued, and I felt the shift coming before he made it, the verbal punch line to his earlier mockery. Not everyone understands the difference between serious business and playing with computers in a basement. But that's fine. The world needs all types. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Several guests glanced my direction, locating the hobbyist at the back. I did not flinch. It was 4 o'clock exactly. The closing bell rang somewhere in Manhattan, and the universe tilted on its axis. Bloomberg terminals throughout the party erupted simultaneously. Sharp electronic chimes cut through the music. Guests' phones buzzed urgently in pockets and clutches. The string quartet faltered mid-phrase as musicians checked their devices. What the hell? Someone muttered near the bar. The murmurs started low, building like a wave gathering strength. AET up 400%. Aether Systems IPO closed at $336 per share. That's impossible. The opening was $84. Richard kept talking, oblivious. Still mid-sentence about family values and business acumen. Still performing for an audience that was no longer listening. It was then that Preston Vance stepped forward from the crowd. He was immaculate in his tailored gray suit. The SEC S1 filing printed and bound in his hands like scripture. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had closed billion-dollar deals before breakfast. Ladies and gentlemen. Preston's voice cut through Richard's speech without needing to raise in volume. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe some clarification is needed. Richard stopped, confused, annoyed. Preston, this isn't the time. I'd like to introduce the founder and CEO of Aether Systems. Preston turned, extending his hand toward me. M.J. Scott. Who's been operating under her initials for privacy. Silence crashed over the garden like a physical force. 200 faces turned toward me, mouths opened, eyes widened. It was the kind of stunned recognition that happens when reality rewrites itself in real time. M.J. Scott. Someone whispered the initials. Then another, piecing together the truth. Rosa Jane. Richard's face drained of color. All that expensive. Scotch-fueled confidence evaporated as his brain tried to catch up to what his ears just heard. Sloan's phone dropped 3 inches before she caught it. The live stream wobbled, capturing her expression perfectly mathematical horror, beginning its slow crawl across her features. The shock was profound. I saw her mind calculating the stock price difference, the missed opportunity. Richard recovered first. Decades of courtroom performance taught him how to pivot when the case turned against him. My daughter. He rushed toward me, arms spread wide for a triumphant embrace. I always believed in her vision. I always knew. I stepped back. One clean movement. His arms closed on empty air, forcing him to freeze. He recalculated again, turning to Preston. The friends and family IPO allocations, he said, desperately clinging to a lifeboat. We should discuss those. I'm sure Rosa Jane has reserved shares for her family. Haven't you, sweetheart? Sloane's fingers flew across her phone screen, her last grasp at greed. She was already multiplying $336 by whatever allocation she thought she deserved. Her eyes glazed over. Bryce Sterling stood near the fountain. Frozen. His investment banking brain was doing the math differently. His 8% commission on the cottage sale was pocket change. Nothing. Less than nothing compared to what he just realized he had lost. I reached into my jacket, pulling out the document I had folded and tucked away in the library 13 minutes ago. The duplicate original. About those allocations, Father. My voice carried. Calm and clear. The voice I used in board meetings when I was about to fire someone who thought they were indispensable. The garden went silent again. Even the string quartet stopped pretending to play. There's a clause in the document you signed. Page 7, paragraph 3. Would you like me to read it? Or would you prefer to read it yourself? Richard's face shifted confusion, concern, Then dawning, sickening comprehension. What document? The one you witnessed at 3:40, 7 p.m. I unfolded the paper, holding it up so the guests closest could see the notary seal. The witness signatures, the attorney's stamp at the bottom. The trust fund release and property transfer. The one you were so eager to have me sign that you didn't read past page 2. The garden remained in total silence. The 200 witnesses focused on the document in my hand. Richard stood before me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The cold comprehension finally reaching his lawyer brain. I held up the paper, confirming its legitimacy for the benefit of his law partners and the judges he played golf with, all of whom were now present. I began to read the clause, my voice calm, clear, and perfectly steady. Complete waiver of all future familial financial claims. I read, each word landing like a hammer blow. Including but not limited to friends and family stock allocations, inheritance expectations, and corporate benefits. Sloan's phone clattered to the flagstone. It didn't shatter, but it lay there. The live stream still running, capturing her face as understanding destroyed her from the inside out. I watched her calculate the price of her greed in real time. Preston stepped forward again, the numbers man, always ready with the data. The friends and family allocation was 1.5 million shares. At the closing price of $336 per share. That's $504 million. Someone gasped. Multiple guests gasped. The number was too large, too devastatingly precise to absorb quietly. You forced them to sign it away. Preston continued, looking directly at Richard. For $50,000 and a cottage worth $850,000. Richard's face was a study in mute horror. His lawyer brain tried desperately to find a loophole. There was none. He had witnessed the signature himself, bullied me into rushing, and signed the very documents that contained the weapon aimed directly at his financial future. Their greed, I said quietly, ensuring every witness heard what I said. Cost them $500 million. Sloan made a sound that was not quite a sob, and not quite a scream. A sound that belonged to someone watching their entire future collapse. I turned my attention back to Richard, delivering the final, professional blow. Aether Systems is also raising Scott and Partners' cybersecurity premiums by 20%. Effective immediately? I paused, letting the implication settle. Consider it professional risk assessment based on high risk client status. 140 witnesses, including his most important professional connections. Heard that assessment. Sloan's Instagram live stream had captured everything: her mathematical horror, her father's arrogant attempt to claim credit for success he had mocked, I and the family that called me stupid, losing $500 million because they couldn't be bothered to read 7 pages of legal documents. Bryce Sterling was a statue by the fountain. His investment banking reputation had just died. Nobody trusts a banker who can't spot a trap that obvious, especially when it involves $500 million. Association alone would kill him in this industry. I folded the document carefully, precisely, and slid it back into the inner pocket of my jacket. I turned toward the exit, my back straight, my posture defying the decades of ingrained meekness. Enjoy the party, I said over my shoulder. It's the last thing I'm paying for. Callan was waiting by the car. He opened the door without a word. Slid into the leather seat. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling shut. Behind me, the garden erupted in a frenzy of whispers. Phones were out, messages were flying, the story spreading like wildfire through networks that would carry it to every corner of their professional lives. The emotional inversion was complete. They had wanted me desperate and humiliated. Instead, they were publicly ruined, and I was leaving a newly minted billionaire. The car pulled away from the estate, away from the people inside who thought I was too weak to fight. They were wrong. The conflict was resolved. The power dynamic permanently inverted. 3 days had passed since the IPO close and the humiliating garden party spectacle. The Wall Street Journal headline about the new tech prodigy was folded on the leather seat beside me, but I didn't need to open it again. The words were burned into my vision. The SUV glided through morning traffic. I was focused on the cleanup, ensuring the brake was absolute. My phone vibrated with an email notification from Willow Holdings LLC, the shell company I established 6 months ago, when I first suspected my family might try something desperate. The subject line read: Property transfer complete. Rosewood Cottage was mine. The bank had been happy to sell the mortgage note that held the cottage as collateral. A clean transaction, cash for debt. Since Richard's planned ownership was contingent on a contract he had violated, I was now the creditor holding the keys. I tapped open the attached property inspection report. Richard and Sloan had been using my grandmother's house for storage, claiming they were moving invaluable antiques last spring. The inspector's photos told a different story. Reproduction furniture from discount warehouses, costume jewelry in fake Tiffany boxes, and a collection of cheap paintings. Insurance fraud, most likely. Another scheme. Another shortcut. They thought I was too stupid to notice even that. I attached the digital eviction notice to my response email. 30 days to remove their belongings. Standard legal language. Professional, cold. I hit send. Richard's attorney called 6 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. I listened while I watched the city roll past my window. The message was full of threats of litigation, accusations of theft, of manipulating a confused old man who only wanted to help his daughter. I saved the voicemail as evidence. Always evidence. I typed back one short text. Review the quitclaim deed. You witnessed the signature. Everything is legal. Everything is documented. This conversation is over. Then I blocked his number. Sloan's voicemail came through next. I played the first 3 seconds. Rage. Tears. Something about betrayal and family, and how could I do this to them after everything they had done for me? I deleted the message immediately. I didn't need to hear the rest. Bryce texted, "Can we talk?" I blocked and deleted his number. Gone. The family group chat still sat at the top of my messages. 17 unread texts since last night. Richard trying to explain, Sloan demanding I fix this. Distant cousins chiming in with their opinions about my responsibilities and my ungrateful nature. I deleted the entire thread without reading past the previews. The emotional isolation felt complete, but it was a deliberate choice, a source of clean, absolute freedom. The past was purged. Then, I changed my phone number. The process took 4 minutes. Preston got the new one. Kalen already had it. My executive team would receive it this morning, with strict instructions about privacy protocols. Everyone else could figure out how to contact me through official channels, if they were worth my time. The final ties, the last threads of obligation and emotional expectation, were severed. My board meeting agenda glowed on my tablet screen. Expansion into 3 new markets. Acquisition targets that would solidify our position as the dominant cybersecurity provider for financial institutions. Revenue projections that made our CFO double. Check his calculations. I was ready. More than ready. I had survived the attempt to destroy me. Now, I would dominate. The phone was silent, the number changed, the lawsuits pending, and the final evictions underway. With the toxic residue purged, my focus snapped back to where it belonged. The future. The SUV pulled up to Aether Systems headquarters at 8:40, 7 a.m. It was a modern tower of glass and steel, 5 stories tall. Our name, in brushed metal letters that caught the morning sun, had been installed last week while the IPO was still pending. No more hiding. Through the glass walls, I could see the lobby. 200 employees gathered, waiting. Someone must have sent a message that MJ Scott was arriving. They started clapping before I was through the entrance, A standing ovation that echoed off the marble floors and high ceilings. My people. My team. The family I chose instead of the one I was born into. This was where my self-worth was measured, not by a lawyer's condescension or a father's lie, but by the work we did and the respect we shared. Preston appeared at my elbow, immaculate in his suit, his eyes bright with a sense of shared accomplishment. Ready. Jay. I looked at the faces watching me. Young engineers who bet their careers on my vision. Executives who left prestigious positions to build something real. Security specialists who understood that protection meant more than just code. They were my true anchor. I've been ready my whole life, I told him. They just couldn't see it. We walked through the applause, through the lobby, toward the executive elevators that would take me to the boardroom, where I belonged. I felt the last of the emotional guards drop. I no longer needed to hide my intelligence or downplay my success. I was fully and publicly Rosa Scott, the billionaire CEO. The car pulling away from the Scott estate 3 days ago had been the act of physical separation. Walking into this building, into the embrace of my chosen family, was the act of emotional completion. The past stayed behind me where it belonged. The future was mine.